You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, we are talking further about neutrality. So we're in a series on the importance of neutrality in the playroom, especially from a child-centered perspective. And we're going to talk through this for several weeks. And I've been actually getting quite a bit of response from this series already, which has been fascinating. And a couple of questions have already been raised. So I'm going to kind of do an overview of what neutrality looks like, and then we'll dive into some specificity in the next few episodes. But I think we need to really understand what neutrality looks like at its core before we explore examples and specific situations. But before we dive in, we have quite a few housekeeping things. I usually try to keep my housekeeping items brief, but there's just a lot that are all kind of swirling around at the same time. So just bear with me. I have to tell you 4 things, and then I want to read an email, and then we'll dive into neutrality. So hold on, please. All right, first and foremost, playtherapynow.com is where you need to go if you are interested in any trainings. So I know Play Therapy Pro is an option for the 6-month program. Many of you have expressed interest in the year-long program, which is this child-centered play therapy training, as well as the private practice business coaching. So if you are interested in going into private practice, you are actively in private practice, you're starting a private practice, it's your goal to eventually have a private practice in the next 1 to 3 years, the 6-figure program might be well suited for you. And that includes both the clinical child-centered information as well as the private practice coaching and business training. So if you are interested in any of the coaching programs, just child-centered, the child-centered plus the business, or getting CEUs, all of that is found on playtherapynow.com. Eric reminded me that I've not mentioned that in a while, so I felt compelled to inform you, especially if you're new to the podcast and maybe you've never heard of that email address before. So Play Therapy Now is the hub for all trainings. By the way, if you're new, so glad you're here. Welcome. All right. Secondly, as you know, many of you, I've partnered with Corewell to provide CEUs. For those of you that have been begging and pleading to have access to the content that I presented in Australia, it is now available on Corewell. So if you go to their website, you will be able to look on the on-demand section. And if you just type Brenna in the search bar, it will pull up. And that is corewellceu.com. For those of you that are not familiar with that address, corewellceu.com. And you will be able to get right around 12 hours of CEUs if you purchase the bundle, which is all of the content that I put out in Australia. There are 4 workshops total, so you can buy them individually if you want or need less, but you can get the bundle for a cheaper price and you'll be able to have all, I think, 11 and a half or 12 hours, whatever it comes out to. So many of you have been begging for that. That is now ready and available to you all. If you have not had a chance, check out the collective. That is ccptcollective.com. Y'all, we have had so many new members join in the last week. It's crazy. So welcome to all of you that are new to the collective. We have such a fun time each week. Live calls, forums, posts, discussions, all kinds of things happening in there. And there's been a lot of new members. So if you're interested in that, please go to ccptcollective.com. Lastly, before I read an email, for those of you that are within driving distance of Mississippi, next month, February 21st and 22nd, is the Mississippi Association for Play Therapy Conference. I am the keynote, and I am planning a meetup. So if you would like to attend the conference for CEUs, please make sure that you go to their website and sign up. If you would like to attend the meetup because you would like to hang out with me and we can chat and have fun together, then please stay tuned. In our show notes, as soon as those details are finalized, there will be an opportunity for you to RSVP for that. It will be that weekend in Mississippi. The conference is being held in Oxford, Mississippi, which is about an hour, a little more than an hour away from Memphis. So if you are in any area of northern Mississippi, Western Tennessee, anywhere in there, and you would like to come to the meetup or the conference, please check that out. We'll post information in the show notes as soon as we have those, including the link to the conference if you would like to sign up there. Okay, thanks for hanging on. That was all the housekeeping stuff. Now, let me read an email to you because we just started talking about neutrality. And right after we talked about this, I got an email from Jacqueline in Michigan. I almost said Mississippi because that's in my brain, but Michigan. And she shared a story about one of her clients. And I think this is so important. And she gave me permission to read. So let's dive into this. I wanted to send an email to thank you for your podcast and to share a session win with you. I love session wins. Thank you for sending this. I've been working with a 5-year-old for a couple of months now. Every session, this client has eloped from my room, ran down to the lobby, and returned to the playroom with his mom and sibling. I've tried many times to redirect that our time together is for playing. The playroom is just for us. However, these approaches did not work. After listening to one of your episodes, you recommended positioning oneself in front of the door. Yes, ninja trick. I took this approach last night. After 5 minutes in our session, the client asked to leave. I reflected by stating, "You're wanting to leave to see your mom." Client indicated yes. I further reflected by acknowledging the client was sad to be away from their mom. Again, he indicated yes. Lastly, I reminded him that our time was for in the playroom and we had X minutes of time left. I gave the choice of bringing mom up to see what we've done at the 5-minute or the 2-minute warning. Now here's where I challenged myself. Client did not like either of these choices and proceeded to knock toys off the shelves, throw fake money all over the playroom, toss puppets on the floor, etc. All while looking to me for a reaction. That's interesting and telling and indicative of all kinds of things that are going on at a much deeper level. So all those little moments of insight gained in that scenario, Jacqueline, I hope that those were helpful. So all looking to her for a reaction. And then she continues, I stayed neutral thanks to your more recent episode and reflected, you're upset that you can't go downstairs to see your mom. In the past, I would have been quick to redirect or set a limit when I saw a client making a large mess. Last night, I chose the path of sitting on my hands and seeing where things went. Watching this unfold yesterday, I started to see a child who is struggling with a level of anxiety and low self-esteem, likely stemming from anxiety and wanting to be in control. I just wanted to share an experience that was inspired by your podcast episodes. Jacqueline, thank you so much for sending that. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing what you're learning and how you're growing and evolving as a child-centered play therapist. And look at that, y'all. The child is so used to getting exactly what he wants, escalating to get there. He's looking for reactions. He's expecting consequences. So when he was not able to go run and get his mom and get his way, he ramps everything up. Starts mess making the whole room, all the while looking to see what's going to happen. And Jacqueline, you stayed neutral. You reflected his feeling. And you were even able to regulate yourself because you would have proactively been quick to redirect or set a limit. And you just waited. And then look at what you were able to gain in the way of insight and perspective. And I suspect that he probably eventually calmed down because they always do. Their nervous system can't handle upheaval for longer than about 10 minutes. So we know that it's a temporary, short-lived scenario. And if we are neutral, it changes the whole dynamic and preserves the relationship. So Jacqueline, thanks for that email. I appreciate it. And for the permission to share it. Okay. So speaking of neutrality. So I teased this as a new series last week. And several of you have messaged me, emailed me, asked in the collective, asked in the coaching. Well, now I'm a little bit confused because we're supposed to be neutral, but we're also human and we have emotions. So I'm not really sure how to not express emotions and not let my own feelings impact a session. All right. So actually, specifically, let me read something from Colleen in Georgia. Can you speak to how we can demonstrate delight in the child while still remaining neutral? As delight in the child is a be with attitude, I'm interested to hear how you see these two principles overlapping. All right. And here's the funny thing, which this doesn't surprise me at all because I end up saying to Eric quite often, yes, you were right. So this is one of those moments. He listened to last week's podcast episode because he produces it. And he says, I think you're going to confuse people. And I said, I wonder why. Of course I did. I'm a CCPT. And he said, because you're saying that you have to be neutral, what people are going to interpret that as they can't have emotions. And I was like, I don't think that that's the way that's going to be perceived. That's exactly how it was perceived. So, all right, Eric, you were right. Now, what are we going to do about it? We're going to talk through this. The theme in the collective this month is congruence. So it's funny how all things converge, right? Divine intervention. All things are converging right now. So we're talking about neutrality. We're talking about congruence. And we're talking about how emotions work with both of those scenarios. So I would argue when we're talking about neutrality, what we are looking to do is find a balance between being neutral and being congruent. Now, without doing a deep dive into congruence, if you have no idea where that comes from, what that means, why it's important, please go back and read Roger's work. Please go back and familiarize yourself with client-centered therapy, and then really understand where CCPT comes from, because 3 core conditions, congruence is one. And the goal there is that the therapist has to be fully congruent with him or herself so that the client can also be congruent with him or herself. And then there can be congruence within the relationship. And we've been talking about this on the collective calls. So when we think about being congruent, that means that we have to understand what we're experiencing at any given moment and honor it and be true to it. If we are experiencing an emotion in the playroom, trying to mask it and pretend that we aren't is incongruent. That's not the goal of what we're talking about here. It is not to have a lack of emotion in the playroom. It is to have a balance between being congruent and being neutral. And the way that I conceive of an explanation of this, because I can hear all of you saying, okay, that's great. So we need to have a balance of congruence and neutrality. What does that look like? Here's what it looks like. In my perspective, this is what it looks like. You can express emotion because it's congruent to your experience. It's congruent with what you are feeling at any given moment. But you cannot have expectation tied to that emotion. So let's dive a little deeper here. If we have neutrality, we have a lack of expectation. We can be congruent. If something makes us laugh, if something makes us smile, if something frustrates us, if something surprises us, being congruent is experiencing those feelings, recognizing those feelings, honoring those feelings, and sometimes letting those feelings be known. However, notice that there's no expectation associated with any of that. If you express an emotion that communicates, you pleased me by doing that. Child makes a picture for you and you take it and you say, thank you. That's not neutral. There's implied expectation there. You pleased me by making this for me. Conversely, we don't want to communicate that you displeased me. Kid hits you in the face with nunchucks. I'm raising my hand because that's one of my experiences. When you get hit in the face, the lip specifically, with nunchucks, and you go, you know that I am not for hitting. That's very clearly an expression of you displeased me. I can be frustrated. I can be surprised. I can be caught off guard. I can be annoyed, irritated. I can be lots of things. I can even be displeased. But neutrality is honoring those things, being congruent to what I'm experiencing, but never communicating an expectation, which is you shouldn't have displeased me. You shouldn't have irritated me. You shouldn't have annoyed me. Are you seeing how this is unpacking? I'm hopeful that this is clicking. Also, I'm happy you did that. Or I'm happy you didn't do that. When a child self-regulates in the room and they've had a hard time regulating, so they're ready to throw something and they self-control and they remember that the wall is not for throwing wooden blocks at because it takes chunks out of the drywall and leaves marks on your walls. When they remember that limit that you set and they haul their arm back like they're ready to chuck it and they stop themselves. Neutrality is expressing that the child chose to do that, but you're not happy about it because there would have been an expectation that the child self-controls. Likewise, I'm happy that you did that. I'm happy you controlled yourself. What about, I'm happy you didn't do that? I'm happy you didn't throw that at the wall. Notice now all of a sudden it's conditional. My emotions are tied to you and my expectations of you, for good or for bad. If I have an expectation that you will do something positive, or if I have an expectation that you won't do something negative. And when we are genuinely caught off guard by something, in a positive way, right? You know, the child tells a joke and it makes you laugh. That's just organic, natural emotion. I found that funny. I'm laughing because you told a joke. That's your congruent self. I'm laughing. You made me laugh. That was funny. But notice that there's no expectation. I'm not laughing because you made me happy. I'm laughing because you made me laugh. I'm not glad that you told me a joke. You just made me laugh. We have to be very careful that we are always mindful about not having expectations of behavior, because what that does is it puts pressure on the child. You have this sense of, I want you to do something, or I want you not to do something. Even if it's quiet, even if it's understated, it's in our facial expressions, it's in our tone of voice, it's in our reactions. Our tone of voice changes, our facial expressions change. We have this aura about us. And here's what happens. It becomes pressure inducing. Oh, well, when I did that, they didn't like it, so I better not do that again. Oh, when I did that, they were so happy that I did that, so I'm going to do it again. The congruence balanced with the neutrality is not lack of emotion. We can express any emotion in the playroom if that's what we're experiencing at any given moment. We just have to temper it against making a child feel like they have met our expectations or failed to meet our expectations. Let me share one final segment of another email that I received. So this is from Terry in Ireland, and she said, I was just listening to your podcast on neutrality. It was good timing. I had a client today who was chatting away and being funny, and I laughed out loud, a real hearty laugh. I recognize now that this was probably over the top. He was pleased that he had made me laugh and now may want to do the same again. Here I am being directive in such an abstract way. Your point on neutrality hit home even from this more positive standpoint. Okay, so Terry, thanks for sharing that, by the way. I want to be really clear. If you just organically laughed because it was funny, that was being congruent to who you are. But if there was any communication, either implied or overt, that you were happy that the child made you laugh, that's where it could become expectation driven and agenda driven, wherein the child's going to go, oh, well, she was so happy that I made her laugh. I'm going to keep trying to make her laugh. Now the motivation is external instead of internal for the child. So I hope that this is starting to settle, and I'm hopeful that as we talk more about this in the next few weeks, we look at concrete examples and dive into a little more specificity. This should help us to monitor this. This is something that I don't think is addressed enough, but gosh, is it important. And that's why we're processing it together. So I appreciate your emails. I appreciate you giving me some feedback, and any questions about neutrality, just please email me, Brenna at thekidcounselor.com. We'll continue to process this together as these next few weeks unfold. Thanks for hanging out with me. I love y'all. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.